Hey everyone, welcome back to Be Not Afraid. Today we are discussing a much requested topic, which is SEL, social and emotional learning. And we decided to do this at the end of the month because I'm going to sort of focus on grace and goodness for the month of November because the stuff is heavy. What we did is went to CaseL.org, and on CaseL, this is a page that many people are getting information about in terms of why SEL is good for their kids. And I get numerous papers of people asking me, please explain why this is wrong. So today we wanted to go straight to their source to take a look at it and discuss the problems with you. My co-hosts today are Brooke and Christine. Christine works with CTA, which is Critical Therapy Antidote, and it's an amazing podcast with really brilliant minds. And Brooke is my
friend.
Yeah, exactly. Brooke is my friend and partner in crime in lots of ways, and tearing up what is Utah. So, all right, let's go over to CaseL. Now, just a quick disclosure, when we came over here the other day, it was pretty hard. It took us about 40 minutes to dig in and to find the pages that aren't just glowing endorsements. And one of the things that's really interesting about these glowing endorsements is that they are peer reviewed and coming oftentimes from the same San Francisco university. So this is equity in SEL. And when you just take a very quick look at it, SEL can be a powerful lever for creating caring, just, inclusive, and healthy communities. Nothing on the surface sounds wrong about that. Right, ladies?
Right.
Right. Yes. I think it's very, I just lost the word, but deceitful. It's very deceiving.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. When we think of just, we generally think of like justice and the two scales and a balanced equality. And that tends to not be what just means today. How would you describe justice today, either of you?
That an identified oppressed class or marginalized class is raised up so that the power, in a sense, changes hands from the oppressor to the oppressed, giving them more power within these structures that we have, be it schools, be it corporations, whatever it is. That's what just is. It's not necessarily holding everybody accountable to the same rules and the same requirements and expectations, but it's hailing one oppressed group over another, and it's seeking to demonize another group in the process, which is looked at to be the oppressors, and that's generally white people.
Right. And another thing that when I think of justice today, I think of BLM.
Yes.
BLM at school. And
yes.
Everything that's come in the last couple of weeks with BLM, with them celebrating paragliders. Granted, it was only one of their divisions, but we're seeing more and more with DEI, more and more protests supporting one side of a conflict,
yes.
not the other side. And that's how I see it. When I see justice, I say, what exactly does justice mean today? Because it means something very different than what we're used to it meaning.
Yes.
Go ahead, Brooke.
Another thing about this is all teachers who've gone through teacher training know that you create this. This has been a part of education for as long as education's mattered. You spend your first month or so just creating a classroom, a culture in your classroom where they know that expectations will be met. That's what you do. And so SEL isn't really needed because teachers have always done this. So they're kind of fronting it as if if you don't have SEL, you're not going to have a classroom that meets the needs of all education for all educational purposes. So it seems like we're saying, hey, no, we don't care about the community and the classroom and the culture in the classroom. But that has always existed. If you've been a teacher, you already know that. You can't teach without having such a classroom. And that's the first month of the year, basically. What you're doing is creating that. So they're like putting it together and saying SEL is this. And you're like, no, we already know this. SEL is the addition of all of these things that you're lying about on the front. So
exactly. And you're lying about it is exactly the words. Like there's no way to kind of pussyfoot around it. Like it's an absolute deceptive model. And the reason that we know this is because you cannot both be inclusive and exclude others at the same time. And that's what inclusive means. Inclusive always means to center around some at the expense of others, in that desire of, if you'll underline the top of the third group where it says deep-seated inequities in the education system. Now, you might be surprised to find out that I actually believe there are deep-seated inequities in the education system. It's just not what these people are presenting. These are the people who have, in my opinion, created the problem. And I spent the last weekend with Bob Woodson of the Woodson Institute and with several minorities who were saying, what they're pushing towards us, we don't want. This is not going to improve things and make things better.
Minorities don't, minorities aren't necessarily on board with it. The oppressed class, which is anybody who isn't white, basically, or anybody who is, well, we'll just stick with that part of it.
Well, no, it's more though. Also anybody who isn't Christian.
Anybody who's not Christian, anybody who's not white, and anybody who's not straight, really. I mean,
right.
I don't want to throw them under the bus because I think it's a more complicated issue there with the gender stuff. But pretty much that's, the oppressed class in a sense. But minority, so this is what's mind-boggling to me. A number of minority people that I know, and minorities in general, do not tend to all see themselves as being oppressed. This label has been hoisted upon them via the ruling class. So the ruling class, the elites, are still in charge in a sense because they are the ones who are defining who the oppressed is and who the oppressors are. It is not coming from the actual group of people that feel oppressed, because most minorities don't necessarily feel that way or don't believe that they should get into college or get an A on a test because the expectations were lowered to meet them, which is what's going on. So you have an elitist ruling class for their, whatever their reasons are, who are making these broad stroke sort of assumptions, and throwing millions and millions and hundreds of millions of dollars into movements because they have decided that that's how our community and that's how our society is structured, with no real evidence, with no real commentary or input from minorities or people who are, not straight. I mean, really, that's the irony, is that there's still so much control. It's even worse now, the control that's over us, than it had been in the past, because the people that make the decisions are the ones who are telling us who are marginal, who's marginalized and who needs help. So we're still under their thumb.
So can I talk a little bit about what you said about the elitist ruling class?
Yes.
I just wanted to identify what that is, because
thank you.
Because when you were saying the elitist ruling class, I'm like, okay, who is she talking about? And then you said those who are throwing money at these programs. So I'm like, okay, so she's talking about the people with the money and the influence,
yes,
as much as the media,
yes,
right?
Yes.
And the textbooks.
Yes.
So it seems, you're not talking about ruling class. And also, is it law? lawyers? Is it politicians? You're talking, like, maybe that's what you mean. But it seems like in America, the ruling class is those who rule our minds, the way we
That's right.
think. And that's being controlled by propaganda, by media, by money, by textbooks. And
Yes.
we can't get the good stuff in the schools. I've tried. But also, who is funding the trainings for the National
Yes.
School Board Association? And that, so we're talking about establishments. And so maybe using a different word instead of the ruling class, because I don't want to give them more power than they have. And so I've really resented that term, because I'm like, they can't rule over me because I'm obtaining my mind. Money can't rule over me, and propaganda cannot rule over me.
Yes.
And I think that's what you meant by it. And so
Yes.
let's give it a new term. Let's call it
Yes.
the mind control losers. Just kidding. I don't know what to call them, but
We'll think on it. I think that's
Oligarchy,
an
right?
excellent point. Yes,
So
excellent point.
I feel
Excellent
like
point.
the oligarchy, I feel like if we were to Google right now the funders of CaseL, we would find out it's very clear that it is Zuckerberg Chan, it is Gates, it is,
Yes.
those are the people that are behind specifically CaseL, which is the umbrella of all things social and emotional learning. And I remember a couple of years ago, Zuckerberg and his wife saying that they wanted to have influence over the curriculum in our schools. This is how they get it in. This and ethnic studies, which are interchangeable. When I was reading through this list and the things that we've already covered with ethnic studies, they're interchangeable. Look at this, the first bullet point here. SEL is relevant to all students in all schools and affirms diverse cultures and backgrounds. All students bring their school identities, strengths, values, lived experiences, and culture. That's word for word what we get out of ethnic studies. So I'm wondering what the point of school is, except for to push this on our kids.
so I want to run a term by this, because who do we want to influence our kids? So maybe instead of calling it the ruling class, we call it the influencing class.
Mm-hmm.
And
What
for
about the
teachers,
colonizing class?
oh yeah, but see, what do people mean by that? They're like, oh, people get so confused by throwing out terms that
Yeah.
have been redefined, and then to try and redefine it again, they're just like, what? So at least I am. And
Yeah.
so to bring it back home to teachers and say, do you want the influencing class to be the ones who are influencing the children in your classroom, or do you want to be the one influencing them? Because I think a lot of teachers have bought on to what is good for their kids because they've gone to the trainings who have told them this is how you create a community in your classroom. But I'm sorry, hundreds of years, teachers know how to create that classroom. They've been creating it. They don't need SEL to do it. SEL is the gateway for all this stuff. And so say, don't let the influencing class take control of the minds of your kids. You guard that, and you be the one who's doing it. And in order to do that, you need to say, hey, CaseL has some agendas that I don't agree with. I'm going to do this on my own. But it's so nice. They've created hundreds of free, ready to go lessons plans that have great media. My school was using it. I went through all of it. I'm like, look at the teacher training. That's always where you go, is you look at the
Yeah.
teacher training of it. Because I go through the kids part of it and I couldn't find anything. It's like, let's be friends. You go to the teacher training, and I would underline it in red, and I'm like, hey, and I went to my principal and teacher and said, hey, look at this. And they were like, oh, but we're not doing that. You're like, then how about you just cut it off?
That'd be great. Yep.
You know what's interesting, well, not interesting, but actually pretty terrible. I was having a conversation with a teacher yesterday. She called me I met her through a different group anyway, but she wanted some consultation to bring back to her principal about the rationale behind teachers and the school going for the pronoun changes that the kids are making for themselves. And their protocol is that they are mandated not to tell the parents, that the parents cannot know. So if this child is trying to, change their gender or whatever it is, transition, that the teachers are required to collude with that by not telling the parents if in fact the parents or if in fact the child says, I don't want my parents to know. So that kind of gets grouped under this whole SEL model, I think, as well, because of the accommodations that are made for transitioning kids without parents' approval. I mean, it was horrifying. The idea is horrifying in and of itself to transition at a young age, but to specifically say the parents cannot know.
And why in the world can you say you're mandated to not do this? And you're like, oh, okay. Since when have we been so dumb to say, oh, okay, you can tell me what to do because who are you? That's when the ruling class, the influence in class becomes the ruling class is as soon as you acquiesce to their stupid demands.
That's right. That is right. Yes.
That's true. And it's really hard to not, we live in a place where people are afraid of being contentious. So instead of, I know, I can see, I can see the writing on your faces, but regardless of how we feel about that, I think it's important that we just go down the bullet points and explain what is here and why we get these faces of, oh no, you're not doing that to my child. Oh no, over my dead body. It's important that they see what's actually here. So in doing so, schools can promote high quality educational opportunities and outcomes for all students, irrespective of race, socioeconomic status, gender, sexual orientation, and other differences. Do you know what's missing out of this now?
Same thing that was missing in ethnic studies.
We know
freedom of religion.
Yes.
Freedom of religion is gone. They'll say, oh, well, that's part of other differences. Well, it used to be our top. That used to be what separated us. That's why people came to America in the first place.
Well, that's what is now biases. Identifying your bias is identifying your religion that's making you a bigot, that's making you all these things with your preconceived notions. That's your religion. You need to lose your religion because that's where our world has gone wrong. So that's why they don't identify it, because they're identifying it in calling you a racist and a bigot.
Yes. Well, what's fascinating to me here is I'm not white and I'm Christian. Well, I grew up Catholic. My parents are not white, clearly. And they came to this country for freedom of religion and freedom of speech to practice because they are Christian. Okay. And they came from a Muslim kind of dominated country where there was a lot of violence. And there was a lot of, you kind of had to hide the fact that you were Christian, even though technically, it was illegal to attack. People did it anyway, and the government colluded with terrorists, let's just say. And so for me, that is the ultimate sort of irony of this whole thing, is that I am also, I grew up Catholic. I identify as being Christian, as some version of that now, but I'm also not white with immigrant parents. So that Christian is, so the whole idea that the Christians are this white group, white supremacy, bigoted group, is absolutely mind-blowing to me. I'd like for somebody to go to a Coptic church, a Coptic Orthodox church, and tell that group that they are bigoted and that they are white bigoted, women and men. Right. And I'd like to see them get thrown out, because there is a wide range of Christianity and Christians who come from other parts of the world that people are not necessarily privy to. And so that blanket statement is offensive, and it's insulting. And it's actually kind of the worst thing you can do to a Christian from the Middle East, is actually call them bigoted or call them a Muslim. Okay, so that's the kind of that's the kind of intensity, right? But also some hypocrisy there too, which I understand. But that whole it's the white Christian group, the Christians and grouping them all to be white. That's very highly problematic and not true. Again, not representing minorities in that way. Same with Latinos. Latinos, who are considered an oppressed class, are also Catholic, generally speaking. So again, here's Christianity being bashed into a white person
Well, and it's the
oppressor
only
class when you have all these other minorities that
but you
are
also have other religions who are
and you
not
have other
going to be
religions.
okay with teaching
Yes.
gender ideology in school.
Mhm.
So why is it only Christians that are on the mandala of
That
oppression?
right. Yes.
Because almost every religion is going to take an issue unless the religion is progressivism, which is a religion. So,
Yes.
and you can be progressive Christian. That's probably the biggest threat, is that people halfway believe, they believe half of this stuff, and then they have one foot in one side and one foot in the other. Can we keep, there's the mandala. These are all of the different ways
I
in
mean,
which
this is
That's a
right.
super bad thing. That's a bad thing. So social justice now, I'll look it up somewhere else, okay?
yeah,
Because it's a bad copy. You can't really read the words.
yeah,
But
that's
look
very
at how
true.
intricate it is. It's very confusing.
That's the whole thing for me, is how very detailed it is. On that one.
I'm
There's
just trying to
no,
find a better copy.
yeah,
That's better.
that is better. Yes. Okay. Let's take a look at
Oh,
that.
that's from Turning Point.
I know. Which I tried to find them on their own sources, because I don't want it to be just, I don't
Yes.
want us to be just dismissed because of this, but all of those, where is
I
it?
can't find it.
It's okay. It's okay. Let's go back and just go down the list.
Okay,
I mean,
here's this if you want to try.
yeah, on that one, um, your different levels of ability, every single thing comes down to making you othered and othering people in our schools. It should be, especially with what's going on right now, with the pro-Hamas things that are going on. It should wake people up that this is the goal of SEL. It is to other. They say that it is social and emotional learning, how to be a progressive. That's really what it is. So
who is running to this wheel to figure out who they are? Because when I look at this, first thing in my mind is, who are you to tell me who I am? Come have a conversation with me. Don't throw a wheel at me and tell me to choose which little things I want to talk about. I'm like, this has nothing to do with me. And even if I were to pick things, you've never spoken with me. And I think it would be really nice if people would just say, I'm not going to even look at your stupid wheel.
yeah,
And so what's the draw of this wheel? I know what the intent is, to get people to identify by this wheel,
yeah.
is to lose all their other forms of identity. But for people who aren't pushing this agenda and feel like they have to help kids find their identity by pointing at things in a wheel, do they just feel like, I'm doing the right thing? I'm feeling I'm really helping these kids know who they are. Is there an altruistic, empathetic thing being touched by this confusing wheel?
Christine, that would be a good one for you to answer, I think.
Well, that's a good question. I mean, the wheel, that these are things that are presented in schools. So kids as young as 6 years old, maybe not as complex as this, but they'll get what they call privilege wheel or something like that, where they have to draw a circle and it's a pie chart just like this one, and put in all the ways in which they're privileged and all the ways in which they're not privileged, and they separate into groups to do this. So they're bringing segregation into the classroom, again, as young as 6. So we'll say first grade. They're bringing segregation into the classroom because they want to start honing down. They want to start. I mean, if we talk about progressivism as this sort of religion, and that SEL is really about teaching progressiveness and whatnot, these wheels are sort of where they start, and they start to kind of break you down a bit with these wheels. So you're told how to think, and you're told which category you belong to, whether or not you actually belong there, whether or not you identify as that is not taken into account. Because if you're to say, well, I'm a brown woman, but I don't think I'm being oppressed, then that would look like I am what they call white adjacent. So either A, I don't see the oppression and they need to shove it down my throat until I get it, and or B, I'm a white supremacist sympathizer. It's one of those two. So these kinds of wheels are meant to tell the minorities what box they need to put themselves in, and they tell the white folks what box they need to put themselves in. So again, it's influencers that are trying to take over, but they're starting at very early ages by laying the groundwork. That's why you have these kids who are 6 and 7 coming home and asking mom and dad what the word privilege means. And my homework assignment is to make a wheel, and we're going to talk about it in class tomorrow. And then they get separated into race groups to actually have those conversations.
And this is not new. I was actually teaching a Sunday school lesson about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and something that I had not understood before was that when they went to work for Nebuchadnezzar, he changed their names and he changed the foods they ate and he changed everything. He tried to change everything about their culture. And then, we go into Mao, we go into Stalin, we go into Pol Pot. That's always what happens. You change. So what happens, and I think the draw in a wheel like this is that when you're circling what you belong in, then you find, oh, well, yes, that person might be white and I might be black, but we both of our families own a car. So this unites us. But the end goal tends to be to unite them against something else, which is why all of these groups that normally would despise each other are walking around being pro-Palestine, because what they are is against the power. But as I've said before, the power is really just those influencers on the top, who their main goal is to make our people as divided as possible. Can we go back to the CaseL page, please? So can we keep scrolling down? Okay. So SEL is relevant for all students in all schools and affirms diverse cultures and background. The main word you need to see here is affirm.
That's right. That's right.
So, and affirming means that no matter what, you tell them that they are correct. Is that
it's exactly what affirm means. It's the difference between, and you see that when you talk about, I'm a therapist, when you talk about kinds of therapy, you have exploratory therapy or affirmation. I mean, there's many kinds, but really what the big controversy now in the affirmation is that, yes, you tell them that they are right, even if they have a skewed view of the world, even if they don't have the facts right, even if the reality testing doesn't match what it is that their belief system is. The affirmations are making them all correct, or telling these people that they are correct no matter how they view the world, excluding facts and excluding evidence. So there's nothing to back up claims other than the fact that it's a lived experience of this person who has their own lived experience, has been around for ages, and it's not a bad thing. It's your lived experience obviously shapes you and whatnot, and that's important. But what they're doing now is they're creating the lived experience to be fact, rather than the lived experience to be a perspective that you have based on your own history and your own life, and that you may indeed still kind of, the way you see the world may be very skewed because of that, because that your lived experience has created that lens. So you work to sort of adjust and to look at that and to examine and to explore. And that's what exploratory therapy, for example, is. So I mean, this affirmations or affirming is an absolute on things that are not necessarily truthful or factual or bound by any real data or reality at all whatsoever, or evidence even. We're now being told to drop, to not pay attention to any of this type of stuff.
Right. So if we look at this line down here, oh, go ahead, Brooke. Did you have
the lived experience thing is also very narrow in scope. It's like, this is what I declare in this moment. Bob Woodson always says something like, the lived experience trumps the data. And what he means by that is that if you want to see if something works, look at the community. Instead of saying the data supports this, you need to do this. Look, if we have made it happen, if we have fixed a community, look at how that's been done and use that as evidence. But their lived experience is so narrow. It's like, I say I'm a cat. Okay, well, let's take that in the span of a lifetime. How is this going to influence you? Is it going to be better or worse? And so they really need to, if you're going to use lived experience, we need to define it so that it can be used properly instead of so narrowly. You know, it needs to take into account the detransitioners. It needs to take into account those who feel they've been harmed. I know suicides that have happened, like close friends. And so you can't just say, I therefore say in this moment, in this month, in this year, and then you say, yes, you really have to expand that and say, let's look at history for the data. Let's look at other people's lived experiences for the best course of action to take. If we're using it to determine what's good, because you're no longer using religion, it's just your the amoral moral relativism.
And you know what? I would argue that that is exploratory at what you just said. Let's take a look at that is what the problem is. There is no exploration or let's look at multiple facts or multiple stories or multiple accounts or multiple anything viewpoints. That right there is what is crippling children in their ability to form critical thinking skills. Mm-hmm. Because it's being, I mean, force fed some philosophy and then affirmed on top of that. But, as you were saying, the lived experience, it's so narrow. And I totally agree with that. And the exploration part is looking at these multiple facts and multiple experience. It is looking at multiple conditions and reasons for things being the way they are, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, I could go on all day.
Well,
and that's what.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But I'm looking at this. Schools adopt evidence-based programs that are culturally affirming and relevant to their communities. No, they don't. No, they don't. I'm sorry, but I just sat in a room with Black people crying because their percentages are 16% proficiency rate. But yet these are proven methods. It's a proven method to drop the bar. It's a proven method to tell a bunch of children that you can't achieve because of X, Y, or Z. It's a proven method to let a kid who suffers with anxiety leave the classroom and go to the mental health wellness center instead of working through their problem in the classroom, taking a deep breath, having a timer that says, okay, in 30 minutes, you will be done with this, or in 5 minutes, you will be done with this. Those are tested and proven. All this does is proves that people will become what you want them to become. So our Black communities, and that's what I'm speaking from, are suffering and they are begging for real improvement.
Yes.
Their eyes are starting to open. I've used it's like a puppy. It's like something that's small and isn't able to see clearly, and then their eyes start to open. And that's what's happening is people's eyes are barely starting to open and they're starting to look around going, why is society not better for my kid? And then when you start to say, well, who's had the power? What schools have you gone to? What have they been teaching? Well, they're the ones who have kept these outcomes the same time and time and time again for your children.
Which school is, and this is something that isn't, that gets overlooked all the time, but there's, as a psychotherapist and professor, I've done plenty of teaching on child and adolescent development and whatnot. And school is one of those environments that's considered a primary environment. Your home life is primary, meaning you're going to be influenced the most and learn the most and become equipped for the real world the most through your primary environment of home. It's probably number one. And the second primary environment, school. So when they're being crippled in school to think for themselves, and they're being crippled in dealing with their anxiety, as you said, Carrie, a minute ago, learning to work through it, learning learning how to accept rejection, learning how to accept disappointment, learning how to cope through all of those things, not by everybody going to the mental health wellness center because you just can't handle it, or you lower the bar because you just can't reach that expectation, or you get to sit in a circle in the middle of class and debrief and process your feelings. No, there's a time and place for that, and that's not where it's supposed to be done. These are people that you're sending into the world that are going to be adults one day that need coping skills on how to deal with the real world, how to deal with rejection, how to deal without being coddled or in some way told, that you're too weak and you're too fragile. So let's sit here and love on you and make it better for you. That is a huge problem when you're trying to prepare children and young adults to learn how to think, not what to think, but how to.
It's also really upsetting that they will say that it's harmful or not loving to teach a person to be resilient. I believe
Yes,
that is the most loving thing that we can do.
absolutely.
Teach a person how to cope.
And it's the
Absolutely.
most freeing. I mean, it feels so good
Yeah.
to be the master of your own destiny. If we can hold
Yes.
people up and say, hey, they can do this regardless of if they're called names, that's so awesome, and this is a big, Dr. Gary Thompson said all the time, why are you letting social experimentation happen in the schools? This is a social experiment and it shouldn't happen. And when we were talking about, expanding lived experiences to exploration, my mind like, woo, no, 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 because that is what we need to base it on truth. We need to base what they're teaching them on facts, on truth, things that have proven in history, and we're basing it on other things, and we're encouraging exploration, especially when the genderbread thing was presented in my son's class. I went to the health teacher and I'm like, so you're required to hold this up. Yeah, but nobody asks questions. I spend like 5 minutes, I show them, I give everybody the flyer. Nobody asks any questions. It just goes over their head. Nobody raises their hand. I'm like, oh yeah, how did I find out it was going to be taught in the next classes? Because my son and all his friends were talking about it, wondering what that is. And the whole purpose of that is to encourage sexual experimentation, to identify where they fall on this backwards little messed up genderbread thing that makes no sense whatsoever. You can't teach it because there's no sense in it. And so that we need to have facts. The teachers have to understand what they're saying. That health teacher did not. He wasn't interested. You can't explain it.
It's interesting because I used to work for FAIR, the Foundation Against Intolerance and Racism, right? And so their whole platform was about bringing, fairness and humanity into the world again, right? So there's anti all of this stuff right here. And one thing that one of the curriculum that we developed while I was there, that was developed by one of the curriculum developers, was a way to teach history where the facts are presented. There's there's evidence, there's facts, there's solid proof that we know of. Okay, based and grounded out. Then once those facts are presented, and once the evidence, then the kids had the ability to debate and have a healthy argument or a healthy debate, make an argument using the facts as evidence to support your claim, or to support the way that you think, and have multiple and kind of an array of possible reasons or possible viewpoints, but that the bottom line is that everything is backed by fact and evidence. So I think it's the best of kind of the both worlds to do that, to both expand on viewpoints but also use facts and evidence to back it up. That you can't just take a stand or a position on something because you want to, and your lived experience is enough to affirm it. That's not enough to affirm it. What has to be done is you need to use facts that are based in source material, historical knowledge, what we know, the facts that we know to be true. That to me is the best of both worlds. That to me is what encourages critical thinking. Here are the facts. Here's what's happened. Here's the evidence. Now tell me, let's have a conversation about that and back up your story, back up what you're saying with evidence, with fact. That's how you learn how to think about the world.
Yeah,
I just loved it.
And even a great dose of humility to ask them, have you ever been wrong before?
Sure.
Right.
Yes.
And
Great.
and so to say, when you were wrong that one time and everybody could think about it, what would have helped you understand where you
Correct.
could have gotten information? Where could you have looked? Is there a possibility that you will ever be wrong again? You know,
Yes.
and
Yes.
and so to say, I actually need it in my life, because if I would have continued thinking that way, hey, what happened to that curriculum
Oh, the curriculum. Which
for
one?
FAIR? Where is it?
Oh, what happened to the curriculum is that, so I left FAIR. I was only there for a year. What happened to that curriculum was it was not purchased by a single school district that it was pitched to.
Hey, can I get it?
You can go, if you go on FAIR, let me think. FAIR Story, I think it's called fairstory.org. If not, just go to fair.org.
Okay.
Fair for All, is that what it is? It's fairforall.org. Let me look at make sure that's right. And breeze through. Okay, look through where it says the school section and how FAIR is involved with the school community and what they're trying to do. And you might be able to pick up the curriculum on the website. Yeah, it's fairforall.org. And then there's a drop down menu. It's like issues, who we are, what we do type of thing. Click on where you find issues in education, things like that. It should pop up in that area. There's the curriculum, actually. It's right under issues in education. You click on the curriculum and they give some examples on how they have changed, how they develop curriculum and what they've supported. Now, we tried to sell it, and I don't know if I'm even allowed to say this, but, oh, well, I'll apologize. What's the phrase? Apologize later.
It's easier to
yeah.
than ask
But
for permission.
yes, so the curriculum was considered way too bigoted in their viewpoint. The schools are so radical that they couldn't tolerate. They could not tolerate even that, which is, gives still space for some
And the crazy
room.
thing is that I would call FAIR, it's still trying to reach both sides. So
They're
I think
trying.
a lot of us have realized that you do have to have an agenda to your teaching.
Yeah.
You do. Today, if you want your kids to be pro-America, you have to teach them that. You absolutely cannot teach them neutrality.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, I do want to come back to a few things. One, what I understood exploratory therapy would be like is a lot of people who are who are affected by trauma in great ways. And this is important because the next thing says SEL is a strategy for systemic improvement, not just an intervention for at-risk students, i.e. this is like teaching all of these kids as if they were trauma impacted.
Correct.
But from what I understand, if you had catastrophic thinking, if you think, oh my gosh, if I don't get this grade or this doesn't happen, the whole world is going to fall apart. You explore that. Well, what would the whole world look like if it fell apart? So you don't cut off the ability for that child to go down those roads, but also to have those safeguards of, but that wouldn't happen because don't you have this in place, and isn't this in place?
Yes, that's right.
We're teaching these kids to be
that's right.
afraid of everything.
That's right.
Part of this. We're making them sick, and it's right there. SEL is a strategy for systemic improvement on people who don't need it,
Right.
not just an intervention for at-risk students.
It's like COVID.
Well, my gosh, you're gonna get me in trouble on this thing. Yes.
Well, you isolate the healthy. Hello, you got it.
Yeah.
Hello.
Yep.
So when it says
true.
Systemic implementation fosters school-wide conditions that promote social and emotional growth for the students. So again, they're creating the problem so that your kids can learn to navigate the correct way of the problem.
Well, they're also creating kids that are going to want the extra sort of attention, if you will. And what happens is it becomes a virus in the classroom. and the
Yes.
milieu gets sort of eaten up by this virus to where now you have all of them bouncing off the walls talking about trauma, and
Yes.
everything becomes right.
Or
So,
race, things,
or
kids
right,
that
all
have
of
never
that.
cared at all.
Yes.
Race, gender, does not matter if your your little buddy is a little bit more feminine or not. You never thought about it before until they
Yes.
told you that you had to, until they told you
Mm-hmm.
you had to center around this. The same thing with race. I've seen so many children who do not care because in their homes they're taught not to care.
Yes.
And we're taught, now we're being told that that is bigoted by the most bigoted people,
To be
by the
colorblind.
grifters.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Um, and then the last one I think we should hit today, and then maybe set up for the next one though. Oh no, go back up because it says, okay, sorry, stay. SEL is a way to uplift student voice and promote agency and civic engagement. The exact same thing, my friends, that we've been looking at in ethnic studies. It is all about turning your children into activists.
Raise problems and identify the solutions.
Right. But again,
Challenge
if
the
the kids,
inequities. Yes.
multicultural communities, SEL and ethnic studies are just multiple hours in school of your children being taught to be progressives. They're
Yes.
being colonized. That I will not back off from that because it's exactly what's happening. While these kids say, Israel deserves to perish because it's colonized. It's exactly what they're doing to our kids. You will give up your
Well, I'd like to know why it was okay for people to stand on the corner of my street where I live on the main thoroughway and hold up swastikas. And yes, so they were having a pro-Hamas. It wasn't pro-Palestine, it was pro-Hamas, okay, demonstration. And then we had banners. We had people that were, not we, but people
right.
that we observed that were holding up swastikas. Why was that okay? And why was that protected free speech? When if you were to see, the opposite of that happen, then that would have been, you would have been arrested even possibly, right? And it would have been all over the news.
Well,
That
not even
wasn't
the
on the
opposite,
news.
right? I mean, if people were walking around with tiki torches, they were
Yes,
supposedly white
yes,
supremacists, but yet
yes,
that's not.
yes.
That's
So
free
that's
speech.
right.
Well, we know that that's Herbert Mancuso's repressive tolerance.
Yes,
That's what it is. And so there are things that we can't fight because it is what it is. But the one thing that we can do is empower as many parents as we can to know
that's right.
what's really behind here. And that's really why we do these. And I do have to go because it's time for me to pick up my kiddo, but thank you so much. And yeah, I'd like to continue on with this. I know Brooke, you're out for a while. Yeah. But I want to continue on and just go down all of CaseL's pages because the thing is that our parents get cute little flyers that say, hey, this is wonderful for your child. And if they would just take the time to go and dig through CaseL's massive website, they'd find the stuff for themselves. You have to decide, do you want your child to be an activist who other people, who hates people because that's what they've been taught to do, to the point that they're justifying the killing of babies? Because that's where we're at right now. We are othering other people. And if you think that, that whole old phrase, first they came for the Jew and nobody did anything, and then they came for this person. If you think we're not on the chopping block, I am on that whole module or that whole mandala thing that we saw. Right there in the corner, it said passing can be a problem. You know what passing means? It means we're not dark enough to be considered the right kind of black.
I've been called that before, actually.
Yeah.
That I
Passing, you've
passed.
been called passing.
I've been called, yes, because I can pass for multiple ethnic backgrounds, unlike somebody who has darker skin than me or who is 100% black or whatever, that has to, that wakes up every day. This was what I was told, that wakes up every day and they're black no matter what they do, whereas I'm passing. So I was totally, demoralized for that, actually, when I was talking about some experiences when I had when I was younger. Doesn't matter, you're passing. So yeah. You as well, Carrie. That would be the case. Brooke, I am really would love to hear your feedback about the curriculum if you end up going through that on FAIR. I would love to get your input on it, but that's for another day and time. But I'm just giving you a heads up. I would love to think what or hear what your thoughts are when you look at it.
Yeah, Carrie, please connect us because I've been compiling all this type of curriculum
Yes.
for people to use.
Perfect.
Yes,
Perfect.
I absolutely will. All right, my friends. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody.
And
Yes.
see you next time.
Bye.
Thank you.